Hello and welcome to the Extremis Publishing Podcast. I'm Tom Christie. Today our guest is David M. Addison, author of An Innocent Abroad and Still Innocent Abroad. This is an account of David's experiences as an exchange teacher in 1970s Montana, when he and his family travelled across to the United States from Scotland to spend a year in the American education system. I think it's fair to say, David, that this has been an interesting experience for you to write about.
Oh, absolutely, Tom. I've looked back on it now, and I think it's the best thing, that I ever did. I've made so many, good friends there, and it was just a wonderful experience in so many ways. Funnily enough, Montana wasn't my choice of destination. What happened was that I was paid by the Exchange Bureau. My fare was paid, but also I had to pay my wife and the children. So I asked if I could be put to the eastern seaboard somewhere, so I didn't have to get involved in paying a whole lot of fares across the country. And as it happens, they gave me Montana, which is just about as far as you can get. But, I was so grateful that that was where I was put, because the scenery is stupendous. To the north, there's Glacier Park. To the bottom, there's Yellowstone Park, and I just landed so luckily. If I could have chosen it myself, that's where I would have gone. But it was ironic that it wasn't really my first choice of places, but I certainly don't regret it.
Now, one of the things that really comes out of both books is the accommodating and welcoming people that you meet in Montana, but also the many cultural differences that you encountered along the way.
That's very true. As I said, I'm still friends with a good number of people there. And, I sort of felt almost like I had celebrity status. My Scottish accent was a sort of passport to so many places and people. You'd go into a bar or something and say, "Oh, where are you from?" And then they'd say, "Oh, Scotland," And so, trying to turn people away from buying me drinks, was not a very hard thing to do. But yes, I was overawed by just how friendly everyone was. But I think that was partly to do with it being Montana. I mean, the town I was in, Missoula, was a small town, really, by American standards. And I think that contributed to the friendliness. I think just by and large it is a very friendly place to be. It was a funny thing, one day we walked up to the town centre and a man there reversed his push bike into me. And he turned out to be a teacher who had been on exchange the previous year to England, actually. So that was another friend, that I made. And then, word got about that I was in town, and then I was contacted by someone who was in charge of the Scottish Heritage Society. So that brought, another whole raft of people that I met. On the matter of cultural differences, again, ironically, I didn't really expect that to happen. I mean, I thought we spoke the same language, sort of. But what really got to me was the absolutely relaxed, laid-back attitude, in the school. I was seen as a very straight-laced, very formal sort of person, in contrast to all my peers. My teaching colleagues. And the way the kids were just So laid back, and I mean, they just did hardly any work. I mean, and they, by contrast, were amazed at how much work I was giving them to do. I mean, one other thing was my class had only 18 students, whereas I was used to almost twice that number. And I had a holiday, really, because whilst I tried to produce more writing from these kids, I mean, they just really revolted. The parents were up in arms about me. And so I just said, well, I was here to do it their way. You know, I wasn't there as a reformer. I was there to just see how they did. So actually, I just sort of took my foot off the pedal a bit, and I had a fabulously relaxing year from a professional point of view.
Well, it's a little known fact, at least on this side of the Atlantic, that Montana as a state features a town called Glasgow, which I'm told has very little in common with the Glasgow that we know and love here in Scotland. One of the things that you mention in both of your books is the fascination that many people in America have with Scotland and Scottish culture. Was this something that you came across quite regularly?
Yes, it was. I mean, I think it's actually anywhere you go abroad that a Scottish accent, you know, does seem to open doors somehow. I was a bit of a, what would you say, a rare bird, you know, a sort of rare species, you know, that had just flown in. And, a person like in the bank, for example, you know, she had Scottish ancestry. And, I was invited to her house, you know, to meet her friends and so on, you know. It's, as I said, you know, it's just a wonderful experience. I'd never been made such a fuss of in my life, you know, when I went there. We did actually, on our travels, go to Glasgow, Montana. It was miles and miles and miles away from Missoula, away across the other side of the state. And it's just a wee totty wee town, you know. It's completely different from the Glasgow we know, yes.
And just along the road from Malta, I'm told.
Yes, we went to Malta, and Malta's very interesting because another thing that Montana does, it has dinosaurs. You know? So that, yes, and that's another thing about the year that we had there. It gave us an enormous chance to travel. For example, one Christmas, we went to see my relations in Canada, near Vancouver. Funnily enough, not Scottish. They're on my mother's side of the family. But I bought a car by this time, and in the depths of winter, we set off to cross the Rockies. You know, the saying about angels go, you know, and it was a bit of an adventure, crossing the Rockies in snow. It's because I didn't know, you know, the sort of hazards that we might experience, you know. And anyway, fortunately, we did it, you know. But it was just another chance to see these relatives that I would never have really met, and then apart from that, we travelled right across the whole of the United States. We went down to Mexico, up the coast, all the way up to Vancouver, and then across all the way down to Florida, and then back up the way to Washington, D.C. It's something that I would never have been able to do if I'd never applied for and been given the exchange. Best thing I ever did, as I said.
Now, you've made some mention of a few of the differences between teaching in Scotland in the late 1970s and the education system in America. Where would you say were the major areas of culture shock between the two?
Well, I think it was, again, I can only say it was my experience in that particular school. I think if I'd been somewhere else, it might have been, completely different. But nevertheless, my experience was, as I said, just the way that the students were not prepared to do any work, or very, very little work, and the way they protested vociferously at being made to do something at all. But I was told that that was the particular school that I was in, that if I'd been in another school in the same town, I wouldn't have found, such a relaxed attitude, or a couldn't care less attitude to their work. And the parents were very, very quick to protest about the amount of work I was giving the children to do. And it was a case really of the tail wagging the dog in many cases, I mean, I'd one girl, for example, who I think it was a misunderstanding, but I'd given out a worksheet, that was meant to last weeks and weeks, and I think she thought it had all had to be done the next day or something like that, or maybe not. But anyway, she said, "Oh, I'm not doing all this." And next thing, there's the mother standing at my desk. I mean, just walking straight in, up to my room, And that was a bit of a shock. And another time I was accosted in the park, we took the kids to the public park to play their sort of football or whatever it was, And a parent came and accosted me there. It's all in the book, these incidents. But the other thing was that surprised me, shocked me, was the way that I was expected. It was wall-to-wall kids from whenever we started to whenever we stopped. That is to say, at lunchtimes, we were expected to take them for games or, something like that. And we had no time off, really, So, the other thing was that, it was maybe just the teachers, my colleagues did, but this emphasis on sport, they just were so addicted to games. And I think maybe the kids, maybe it's just a Montana thing or something like that, but they would just love taking the kids to do sporting activities instead of doing their subject matter,
And do you feel that was an issue of promoting physical fitness, or was it more to promote competitiveness between the students, or was it perhaps a blend of both these things? I
don't think it was either of them, really. I think they just thought it was enjoyable. I think they just. Well, I think Montana, it used to be the Wild West. You know what I mean? That I think I dare say some of that sort of frontier spirit, still persists. You might say, But no, I just think they thought it was a bit of a laugh.
Now, one thing that both of your books have in great abundance are amusing tales and accounts of your time in Montana, most of which are focused around cultural misunderstandings. Were there any particular incidents that stand out in your mind?
It was I kept getting shocked culturally, I suppose, in small ways throughout the year. I mean, that's why I call it innocent, because things happened, which, I just didn't expect, This particular day, I went to the gas station, as you would call it, and, it sounds stupid, really, but I couldn't open the petrol cap, for example, until a kind gent came along and, showed me what to do. Let me tell you about this car, by the way. The point about the car was that I call it the big blue mean machine in the book, because it was always breaking down. And nevertheless, that's the car, I mentioned before, all those thousands of miles that we did. But that was the one that, took us about. And I just wasn't really familiar with it at all. I did a lot of bits to it. I suppose that cars in our country didn't, although it was an old banger. So anyway, the other thing, it's not really culture, I suppose, but one of the first questions I was asked was, do you grow any produce? And I said, what? Produce? What's produce? And produce actually turns out to be what we would call produce, which is a very grand term for what you might grow in your garden, like potatoes or leeks or something like that, So in some ways, I suppose we did sort of, speak, a different language. I did know about rubbers, of course. I did know not to say to my students, might take out your rubber, instead of your eraser. I was warned about that one.
Was there any one particular incident which stood out for you as being a kind of defining moment in your early months there in Montana?
Well, I think it was more at the beginning, that I think the encounter with the parents, was the thing that, that really got to me more. And, as I said, I took my foot off that pedal, those things settled down. But, when I went to Montana, I was a very quiet, living sort of a person. I didn't have any money to go out enjoying myself anyway. But the thing that really got me, was the family, next door. I've given them aliases, to protect their innocence. But my friend Al, the cop, was a real sort of live wire, and a great appreciator of my country's national product. And, I think one lasting legacy of meeting him was how much he converted me to my national drink as well. I had taken over a couple of bottles for, to see me through the year. And actually, the first night I went over, what was left, and we're talking about a litre bottle here, remember, was not worth taking back home again, to be honest. So Al was very appreciative of that type of whiskey and insisted everybody else have a go of it as well. And he took me, logging. That was another thing, I suppose, that surprised me. Missoula is surrounded by forests, and the citizens are allowed to go and cut any fallen trees and take it back and burn it in their homes. So we went on some logging expeditions, and that was hard work, I can assure you. They were cut up into 4 or 5 foot lengths or something like that, and of course, depending on the thickness of the trunks, they certainly weighed quite a lot, and then that had to be put onto the back of a trunk, and then that was built up higher and higher. So yes, that was another aspect of Montanan life, that I never expected. And I was taken on backpacking trips, hiking into the wilderness. There's a funny story on that, actually. We were in Idaho somewhere, because Missoula's just on the Idaho border, as it happens. So anyway, we'd put the tent up, we'd caught fish, which we had for our supper, and put the fire out, got into our sleeping bags, and suddenly, well, you got to understand, we were miles from anywhere, and suddenly there was this eerie, unearthly light. And my colleagues were saying, what could that be? One of them suggested it might be a UFO. And first thing he did was he got his gun and went out to deal with whatever it may be. What had happened was it actually got quite windy, and the wind had revived the embers of the fire. But the other thing actually that story does bring to mind is the gun culture there. My headmaster, principal, you would say, he had 13 guns in his house. They were all hunters. One of my friends, he went every year. He went and got a moose, or an elk, or a bear even. My other colleague was more addicted to fishing, But so you hunted something or you fished something. And it seems to me that that was par for the course. That's what they all did. So that was another cultural shock, because I didn't do any of that stuff before. I could never do any hunting. I could never do that. And to be honest, I'm not very happy about fishing either, to be honest. But nevertheless, I did go on a fishing expedition, or several. We also, I remember, went on a rafting expedition. We floated down the river on a rubber raft, Yes, so I was exposed to all sorts of things. And actually, I said right from the start, I will do anything. If somebody suggests to me, would you like to go and do this, Dave? I said, yes, I will. I'm not going to miss a chance. Until somebody suggested, would you like to do hang gliding? Because they used to jump off the mountain that was, just behind the university. And I said, no, I don't think I'll bother with that one. Thanks very much.
Now, one thing that comes out of both of your Innocent Abroad books is the fact that you made many lifelong friends in your time in Montana. Now, given the major cultural shifts of the 1980s and 1990s, do you think, having revisited Montana in recent years, that your experience would have been different had it taken place a few years later?
Most definitely. The year that I was there, that was 78 to 79, I had absolutely no idea what anybody voted. On a subsequent year, in the tenure of George W. Bush, I did know. And most of them were Democrats, some were Republicans. But that was really as far as it went, I never discussed politics with them, when I was there at the time. There didn't really seem as if that mattered.
Your Innocent Abroad books cover the first 6 months of your time in Montana, and one of the inquiries that we receive most frequently at Extremis Publishing is whether you will be producing a third book to finish the story. Can we expect that at any point in the coming years?
Well, I really, really would like to do it. As you say, I've only covered 6 months, and I've probably got enough material to do another 2 books, to be honest. I don't know when I'm going to get the chance, because I've got so many more books to write. I would love to do it, but, time is the enemy. I think it might be, if I do ever get round to doing a third volume, it might just be a third volume, because I'm getting less and less innocent, I'm becoming more and more experienced, more accustomed to the American way of life. So, there's perhaps not the adventures, to come that would fill a book. But I do know that I left the last book, the second book, on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I can reveal that somewhere near the start of the third volume, if ever I get round to it, will tell the tale of how my wife Iona broke her finger in the fan of the big blue mean machine. She had to scoop up the children and take them to the nearest doctor, which was at the end of the street, and he was actually a gynaecologist by speciality. But that is another tale that I hope I will get the chance to tell one of these days.
Well, David, I can honestly say that your books have been thought-provoking, humorous, and have really shone an interesting light on cultural differences between us here in Scotland and our American friends across the pond. Thank you very much for having taken the time to have a chat with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Tom. I've enjoyed it.
An Innocent Abroad and Still Innocent Abroad are published by Extremis Publishing and are available to buy from all good online retailers and independent booksellers worldwide. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you'll tune in again soon.